Up, I won't ever let the doubt creep in. Gotta pop a couple more aspirin. I don't think I'll ever let you in. Easier to break it off best friends. I don't really understand myself. I don't really understand, need help. I don't wanna be left on the shelf. Couldn't even hear me if I yelled. It's so cold outside.
Hello, welcome. I'm your host for Anime Utopia, Golden Reaper. Okay, so you might have been expecting somebody like Karma, Ellie, Dino, Oakley already uploaded, or Slayer, but Slayer canceled, and I'm actually him. But yes, I'm actually him. Yeah, there's a whole thing. It was a whole thing. Don't even question it. Don't even question it. Why I'm known as Golden Reaper now, okay? But yeah, let's get into the story. This is what if Deku had a metal absorption quirk. Basically, his ability is, if he touches a metal, any metal in the world, doesn't matter what metal it is, and in this world, any fictional metal you can any fictional metal you can think of, they have it in this world. So, no, let's not make them that overpowered. They have vibranium they have vibranium and adamantium. That's the only exceptions. You know what? Let's just make it normal metals. Yeah, let's make them not. Let's not make them that overpowered. Let's just give them regular metals. So it's like top ones. So basically, if he touches them, his whole body or a portion of it, whatever portion of his body he wants, will turn into metal. Basically, say he touches tungsten, he only wants his head to turn to metal. His head, hair, eyes, everything will turn to metal, and he'll basically, to him, everything's the same, except he's much heavier, he's the exact same speed as he was before, he's much stronger, and he's much harder to hit, and he's much more painful to hit. So we begin this story when Deku's at the quirk doctor, where he'd basically just tell Ingo what his quirk is. It wouldn't really be much of a difference, as she's actually really happy about this, because now she knows that her son has a quirk, and it's a pretty strong one at that. As Deku would go back to school that next day, and Bakugo would be bragging about his quirk, how he can make explosions and all that stuff. But when they ask Deku, everybody starts asking Deku what his quirk is. He pulls out that little piece of scrap metal, as his whole body just starts transforming. Of course, Bakugo says his quirk's better because he can actually use it without something external that he needs. But Izuku say that he can use his quirk as much as he wants. It has no limit unless he's awake, unless he's asleep. He can't activate his quirk in his sleep, but still, he has no limit on how long he can be on. While Bakugo can run out of sweat if he's not hot enough or something else. So of course, Bakugo's yelling at him like, "What you say? I'm the best. You can't say anything about me." And Deku would just dismiss him completely. And he just move on to using his, as later that day, a couple days later, Izuku's walking in the park. Izuku's in the park, and he see Bakugo bullying a girl with a black hair and a ponytail. You know who this is. So he run up and just say, "Bakugo, why are you doing this? Just stop." He's like, "No! She is a useless quirk, and she deserves to be beat up!" As Izuku would pull out the same piece of scrap metal, and turn his body into it. Basically, it's like just a regular type of steel. It's like spring steel, I'm gonna say. So he just runs at him like full top speed, for like a 4-year-old, as it just be a complete punch to the face. Like, he wouldn't do it so hard, but he'd still do it tough enough where it's painful. As Bakugo, he's going to start distracted watching, the girl would get up, create a metal bat, and just hit them in the back of their heads. And Izuku would look at her, say, "Huh, you can stick up for yourself if you can get enough timing." She's like, "Yep, I guess. Well, thanks for saving me." Is it? Yeah, it's what somebody should do. They shouldn't just leave somebody to get beat up. Well, thanks. You want to go play? Yeah. As they just start swinging and talking together, as eventually the girl would have to leave, and as she's going to her butler, Izuku would yell out, "You didn't tell me your name!" As she say, Momo Yorozu. I'm Deku. I'm Izuku Midoriya. As they'd part ways for a while, and they would say they'll meet up sometime next weekend. So they would, and they keep meeting up, and they'd basically become best friends. As one day when they're 13, it's Deku's 13th birthday. As Momo, basically he invites Momo and a couple of her friends over. With them, as they would just they just spend their whole day. As eventually they get in Deku's treehouse, where they start playing Truth or Dare, and one of the guys would just say, he talked to Izuku and say, "I dare you to kiss Momo." As Izuku would blush, and she would blush, and they would kiss. As she said, "I guess that means boyfriend girlfriend now." As Izuku would eyes just brighten so much as Izuku would I can't remember what I was thinking. I remember what I said. I thought to myself, let me think. Oh, yep. Now I remember it. As it would be Izuku's turn to choose somebody, is he'd choose the guy who gave him his dare and say, "Truth or dare?" "Truth." "Is it true you've been looking at the teacher?" As the guy would start viciously sweating as much as it's possible for a 13-year-old to sweat. He sweat that much just a couple seconds from those words. As everybody would just break down laughing as Izuku would say, "I'll take that as yes." And yeah, so Izuku would okay, so basically Izuku and Momo would start dating. They build up a relationship. After a while, they built the relationship even more, until eventually it would be I'm tired. Eventually, it's senior year of high school, and Momo is actually transferred to Izuku's school, where they would basically she would come in, sit down, as teacher would welcome her, and then he'd do the whole thing about being the best student. As Bongo would do his whole speech, and Deku would jump up and stare at him, saying, "You think you're the best? I'm the best!" As they basically get like sparks of lightning just shooting off their eyes from just a pure anger you could tell they were having, with the teacher telling them to rile, get down. As later that day at PE, Bakugo would go up to Deku and say, Hey Deku, you know that new girl in the school in school?" He's like, "Yeah, she's my girlfriend." He's like, "Ugh, I'm gonna take her from you." As people did hear that, and Deku would just reach into his pocket, touch it, his skin would turn to his fist would turn to tungsten, as he just punched Bakugo right in the throat, ripping his vocal cords. As he'd be on the ground unconscious, and the everybody would start running over. Whole thing. Zuko would go to principal's office, where he'd explain what happened, and the principal's like, "Yeah, he deserved it. He deserved it completely." As he'd just say, you still have to pay a fine for assault, but still, he deserved it. So, that's what he would do. Just pay the fine, and he'd go. And instead, since he got detention too, so him and I'm gonna say Momo stayed behind with him just so he wouldn't be alone. Because I'm gonna say he was the only one who got detention that day somehow. She didn't want him to be alone, so she wanted to talk to him later, so she just stayed back with him. Well, Bong goes into the ER, they're trying to heal him, but they can't, because when Izuku punched him in the throat, he physically tore them and destroyed them just by punching a punch to the throat. As there's no healing it. Like, Banga's basically gonna be a mute. As Izuku will start beginning his 10 months of training. As basically he's ordering a bunch of different medals online. He's doing all kinds of stuff. As he's actually gotten into forging, which isn't really he doesn't actually do anything like making the swords and all that, making anything. He basically just melts metals together. He melts down metals, combines them, and then he uses that as a combination mode. He uses that as a way of combining both the properties of both metals. So yeah. But by the end of the year, it would be after 9 months. Izuku would never have met All Might. All Might would have never dropped the bottle. Basically, Deku never gets one for all. So Izuku's just sitting there in his off. My head is itchy. So Izuku's just. It's graduation. So it's graduation, and Izuku's just waiting for. He's just sitting there is sitting there, and they call up his name. Everything goes on for graduation. People are crying because high school's over, and yeah. So when Izuku, I'm sorry I'm cutting out so much because I just saw this one on the fly, so yeah. Please check out my channel, Golden Reaper What Ifs, if you made it this far. Yeah. So, yeah. Izuku would basically just go through graduation, and a month later, Izuku would get a recommendation to UA, but he declined it and say he's gonna earn his way in, and Momo respect that, but she kind of got insecure about if she could get in with her quirk, as he just told her that it was fine if she didn't want to go in through regular means. It's that he knows she just wants to be a hero. So he doesn't really care about that. As for so Izuku would head to Izuku would head to, what was it? Yeah, he'd go to the entrance exam where he'd pass the test easily, regular test easy, and they'd go in. With him running in as fast as he could, just charging in, busting down robots, all kinds of stuff. As eventually he'd get about 90 points, and he'd hear a girl screaming as he'd run over to see Uraraka trapped in the rubble in the 0-pointer. He'd obviously just continue running as fast as he could to get her, as he'd basically touch Now let me tell you how strong he is. Actually, forgot to tell you this. By himself, he could lift about 1,000 pounds. That's his limit. With metals, with whatever transformation metal he transforms into, it multiplies by a different amount. It doesn't really matter about how much, but each one makes them a different strength, depending on how dense the metal is. So yeah, he'd turn into tungsten as he'd get a tungsten and titanium little nugget as he'd transform into both and throw the rubble off actually, he wouldn't really need it, but yeah, he doesn't need it. He just throw the rubble off of her, pick her up, and start running. He'd get out, and 2 weeks later, he'd get an acceptance letter. So yeah, tell me if you want me to continue this series. If you do, leave a like, subscribe, go to my channel, go to the other Utopians channels, and yeah, hope you enjoyed. Bye.